Ready to go live? Yes, you're live. Go for it, Dust.
Well, hello. Thank you, Khalid, for hosting me, Dust, and Josh will introduce himself in a second. I'm a human rights advocate and believe that the very quintessential of all discussion should stem from the concept of human rights being applied to it, and therefore action is decided on the rights of humans. And if it destroys that, then obviously I would think that's bad. So that's kind of where I come from. So on that note, we are going to be talking about the war machine, capitalism's war machine. Capitalism being the invention of one of the Abrahamic religions in Germany. And why has it become so addicted over the last 2,500 odd years to this continuous war which has raged across our different communities, Muslim communities, Christian communities and Jewish communities, and anybody that exists for any reason, unless you're the top of the draw in society. Oops, I forgot to start the clock. I think that was about a minute. And anyone, unless you're the top draw, unless you're the absolute ruler, one of the absolute rulers, one of the top trillionaires in society, which Abrahamic religions absolutely promote and regard as the prophet being, in this case, as a messenger from God. That prophet, and the word prophet being mixed up between the two of them is not accidental. They are worshipped equally in Abrahamic religions. And guess what is the ultimate prophet? The war machine. Absolute massive money maker, guaranteed easiest money to be pumped into your situation, into your into your bank, by creating an enemy who looks like a different coloured skin, like Khalid, different religion, like Khalid, and therefore now we can justify a crusade over to purify and civilize such heathens that now present to my left or right, wherever you're looking at. That's where one of the foundation rocks of these catalyst concept of a positive action, which is creating that diversity. What's the word?
Diversity.
Not diversity. It's division. Sorry, the division within communities. A country is a community. It should be seen as no different. A country is a community, and when you attack a country, you attack a community. That's what you are attacking. There's no one identity. There is no one ideal individual. It is a community of people. You're attacking a community, and just look at the amount of money the Christian USA spends on military each year. We're talking hundreds of billions of pounds dedicated to the cause of murdering human beings. This has been a motif, as I was saying before, 1,000-year hit, a motif that Hitler enjoyed, a motif that kings and queens have enjoyed and indulged in with a perverse passion of magnitude, increasing magnitude. And yes, it makes them richer, but fundamentally it rapes the community of its humanity. You get the profit, and then you get the rape of the community via the means of war, because war, austerity, poverty, disease, and the lack of any community development in buildings, infrastructure like a national health service, free health. All these institutions are thrown to the side, and all that money which would have gone into those institutions, education and human rights is an institution, by the way, all this money would have normally gone in there is now taken away and raped by these individuals in the capitalist system, which is, as I said before, part of the Abrahamic understanding of reality and politics. And this has been unbelievable they've got away with it for so long. That's because we don't have international laws. So these capitalists undermine anything like the United Nations, anything where any human group, where the community comes together and says, actually, murdering each other en masse is absolutely abhorrent. And what is the bedrock about all this murder? Is we're doing it in the name of God. It's the name of God, whether it be Muhammad, whether it be the Christian God. He doesn't have a name apart from God.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Judaism it's called Yahweh.
Well, there you go. We're doing it in the name of him. We're doing all these horrific actions and deeds because that's what God deems. That means anyone who says the sentence, well, slaughter and rape is pretty unnatural and unhealthy and not the way to have a humanity, a vision of humanity, is regarded instantly as against God. The psychopaths of this world hide their psychopathy. Thank you. In the veil of their God, because their God was designed. Not all gods are Abrahamic, of course. There are many gods on this planet, many ways of interacting, many ways of worshipping, many ways of feeling at one. And rape and murder and war is just the Abrahamic's ultimate expression of their devotion to what they believe is their powerful and their dominant and their true God. Well, the sad thing is 2,500 years of history has been done in the murder of God.
Oh, by the way, if you want, you can. I'm just putting on the screen the comments and stuff, so you can respond to them if you want as part of your answer.
Appreciate
it's up to you.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I've got 4 minutes left.
Sure.
And I'll probably hand over to Josh in a second anyway. So if the war exists, if your symbols, if your leaders have weapons on them, that means you are into God as the destroyer and the slayer, using the expression of weapons as a way to perform political change or understanding within a society. Look at your symbol of flag over your leaders, and if there's weapons on them, then you have to agree that therefore that your particular flavour of worship with God is done through murder and rape. There is no way those weapons are there accidentally. So you do need to look at that and do need to face up to the horrors of maybe your leaders have conducted and lied upon over the communities. Would you like to add about Wagner and Hughes and Ukraine and
just one particular case study
and this new war?
We've recently been told about the what we think what is alleged to be a state-sanctioned assassination of Wagner leader Yevgeny Prigozhin. We don't know for sure exactly who is responsible for this. What is most likely, assassination. Although I was just conferring with Dust earlier on that both the Ukrainians and the Russians had equally compelling motives to do so. The Ukrainians had every reason to want to discredit Putin, even if they wanted to take out a valuable asset. But then the inverse is true for Putin. But on one hand, it would have discredited his government to assassinate Prigozhin. But on the other hand, assassinating him takes out a potentially formidable opponent. Of course, there are still plenty in Russia that have not yet been imprisoned. In fact, the person most likely to win the Russian elections after Putin is actually Gennady Zyuganov, who is the leader of the Russian Communist Party, and he came second in the latest round of elections in Russia. So it is debatable whether or not Putin would actually take the ultimate step, bite the bullet, and assassinate him. But he did have compelling motives to do so, and he certainly had opportunity. But on the other hand, the Ukrainians had motives like after Yevgeny Prigozhin led a mercenary that leveled one of their cities and killed tens of thousands of their citizens. The Ukrainians might have been a bit vengeful and thought and discarded his potential usefulness. and just wanted to get even with him by killing
So
him.
Yevgeny, whatever his name is, he's from the Russian
Yevgeny
side?
Prigozhin.
Yeah, Prigozhin. Is from the Russian side?
Yes.
Okay, sure. Because I'm not totally following what's happening. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, no, it's hard to follow sometimes. Oh, are you talking about the interference? I think there's a helicopter over our end, so it's interfering with the signal.
Oh, no. Just generally, I don't follow all the politics of the Ukraine war. That's why I don't know who.
Oh yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Is.
I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair, people have seemed to have almost forgotten about it now because it's
true.
Even though actually it's drawing ever nearer to us in terms of not so much Russian advances because they have stalled quite a lot, but in terms of deteriorating diplomatic relations, the instability, and also the fact that the Ukrainian government is not faring particularly well at the moment. Indeed, they're under attack. And that Poland, Poland has had its air traffic control hacked, supposedly by the Russians, although we don't know for sure. And then, of course, there's our air traffic control that has come under cyber attack. Again, presumably Russia, but we don't know for sure about that. But the point is that it is drawing ever nearer to our doorstep. Not to say that we shouldn't care until our interests are threatened. We should care anyway about this conflict, irrespective of whether or not our country faces a direct threat. But things are not getting better. In terms of
I'm trying to see where you're coming from, like that angle in terms of the main topic, which is, does capitalism lead to war?
Well,
are you giving a background of a current war or something? And there's
the pertinence is that it is a current war, and that the person in question, the case study, the paradigm in this case is a person who is arguably a capitalist because he was a capitalist. We have to talk about the past in the past tense now because he's dead.
Who's the person we're talking about? Both sides are capitalists, aren't they?
Well, yeah, of course, but this is exactly the point. Capitalism versus capitalism is like fighting fire with fire. You're not going to put out a fire by putting it out with more fire. But the pertinence of the person in question, the eponymous character of the conversation, is that he is a capitalist. He is a mercenary. He has profited for decades from other people's suffering. He has preyed on vulnerable, albeit dangerous citizens, in this case, Russian convicts who have been convicted of all kinds of horrific crimes, murder, not just robbery and petty crime, although a lot of them have been, but, murder, rape, all of these despicable crimes, and he is, but the thing is, he has not rehabilitated a lot of these people. He has not allowed them to atone. He has simply led them to their deaths, and made it look as though he redeemed them. But he didn't redeem them in anybody's interest except his own. And he didn't redeem them anyway. But even if his intention was to redeem them, his intention was entirely self-interested. It was not. It was a capitalist exploiting vulnerable and yet also quite dangerous people, simply for saving money and solving any potential manpower shortages. I mean, fair play to the convicts. Actually, they did seem to fight pretty well, considering they weren't properly trained, and they eventually did take the town. But I'm not defending their actions.
Slight
digression, but
in war, there are no heroes.
Oh no, they're not heroes. I never said that.
There are no heroes.
But you're allowed to say they fought well.
They're just murderers and murdered.
Yeah.
And just widows.
It's just war is just legal murder, isn't it?
War is legal murder, which is the point I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This point is, let's remember the important details with the current war. It's been funded by America and the West. Yeah. These Abrahamic constructs are fueling this horror under the guise of NATO, trying to create another NATO state, which was the agreement originally with Russia that Ukraine wouldn't become Ukraine. And the main reason for that is because still is, I believe, that could have changed, a big population of Ukraine are Russians, and have that, what you would call a nationalist identity. And that national identity is part of their Russian language, religions and traditions, and other aspects of
I was going to say, not all of that is to be frowned upon. I mean, the traditions and culture of the country. I think that, you know, that.
No, definitely not frowned upon, but never to be used as a reason to murder
No,
another human
absolutely
being.
not. No,
traditions are great until you use it in the name of God to slaughter your neighbor because he's the wrong religion, or looks gay, or looks not like you.
To be fair, Ukraine and Russia are both Christian Orthodox countries. I think the sectarian dynamic is the matter of dispute, although there has actually been a split between a rift between the Ukrainian Orthodoxy and the Ukrainian government, not simply the Russian state. That's a separate issue, but there's actually been a lot of dispute between Ukrainian Orthodoxy and the Russian state.
Okay, Josh has had 7 minutes. I've had 7 minutes as well, 8 minutes, and so it's now over to our wonderful, esteemed host.
Thank you. But before we do, we missed out Josh's intro. I wanted to hear something how Josh would like to introduce himself. I mean, I know we're doing it in reverse, but it'd be good.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, we can re-edit it though, can't we?
No, we can't. We don't edit. We're too late. I'm too late.
Okay.
It's a live stream anyway. You can't edit it. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, we are. My name is Joshua, and we are talking about war and capitalism, and the profiteering of mass murder. And
what I wanted to know is about you. Yeah. Like your kind of background. So where you're coming from.
I'll give 2 minutes.
Yes, my name is Joshua. I'm from London. I work for the NHS.
Political, ideological background.
I think we'll work on Josh's introduction, to be honest with you. I think
you need to spin around like Dust does and say weird stuff.
We'll
like
work
the dust
on
is settled. You're going to teach him how to say the dust is settled.
He's not used to YouTube, and there's a danger that he's he's not introduced introductions. So we'll work on that for next time.
All right. Yeah, don't make it too personal. Not all your phone numbers and all that kind of stuff.
No.
We'll just work on
joking.
That.
Okay. So thank you. Yeah, from London, NHS, and not a communist. We learned last time.
Yeah, apologies.
A socialist.
My bad.
A socialist. That's all right.
I apologise again.
Well, no, but it gives you a rough idea where people are coming from. You don't have to apologise. Anyway, so and myself, mentioned London. I think it reminds me that I've got to mention I was from London, and now I'm in Jordan. Hence the garlic hanging off this window in the balcony and stuff growing in the background and cool, interesting stuff happening all over me. Jordan is very kind of down-to-earth country, doesn't have any oil money, which is fantastic, which means it's got a lot more culture. And me, myself, I'm a Muslim, and I do these live streams not just for some sort of academic thing to prove myself to be right or something, but I genuinely want the world to become a better place. So I share ideas that are from Islam, that have been tried and tested, that you can see are working, especially in terms of relationships and things like that, but also in wider topics like we're talking about economics, all for the benefit of making the world a better place. And you don't have to be a Muslim to learn from these ideas. So that's my background. And so what are my ideas about this? There's loads of great points that Dust and Josh have been making. I've been making a note of them. But let me start off from, as I'm saying, I'm speaking on behalf of Islam, I should do it from the Quran. And here's a verse of the Quran that is relevant, but I suppose I should introduce it quickly. And that is that Islam is not against capitalism. Okay, capitalism, as far as I understand it, or the way I would describe it, is simply using token money basically to exchange goods, so you don't have to barter. It's a very vague term. There's nothing inherently bad about it, but it can be used for good or bad depending on the people. What is dangerous and relevant to the discussion about capitalism causing war is this verse of the Quran, which talks about an interest-based economy, an economy based on lending money on interest rather than investment. Okay, so maybe I'll talk about that. There are alternatives to using interest, is what I mean. And so this verse of the Quran says, those who devour interest do not rise except as rises one whom Satan has smitten with insanity. This is because they say trade is also like interest. Okay, in the old terminology, it's called usury. And usury, interest-based economics, is banned in all the Abrahamic religions. Very interesting. Whereas Allah, and Allah, by the way, we were talking about what God is called in different religions. Allah is the Aramaic, the language that Jesus spoke. Allah is the word for God as well, okay, as well as Yahweh and other words. It just means the God in Semitic languages. And Semitic languages are languages, common between basically Arabic and Aramaic and Hebrew, basically. Anyway, so Allah has made trade lawful and made interest unlawful. So he to whom an admonishment comes from his Lord and he desists, then he will, and that which he received as a past be his, and his affairs is with Allah. And those who revert to it, the bad ways, the interest ways, they are the inmates of the fire. I like Josh's terminology earlier on when he was talking about fire, fighting fire with fire. It's very relevant here. Therein they shall abide. Essentially, what we're saying here is capitalism, not bad by itself. Just like nuclear power can be used for good and bad, money can be used for good and bad. Okay. But interest necessarily leads to bad. Okay, what is interest? It's taking money and you have to give more money back, whether the money that you borrowed, the purpose of which is usually business or something, right? Even if your business works or not, doesn't matter. The money, the bank wants more money back. Okay, that's different.
Khaled.
Yes.
Khaled.
Yes.
We're talking about war.
Yes, how it leads to war.
Capitalism. We're talking
about
war.
how capitalism leads to war, and I'm explaining that.
You're talking about interest. That's got nothing to do with war.
You see, give it 1 minute, you're going to find out. Give it 1 minute, you'll find out. That's all right.
Apologies.
Okay, that's all right. So some people might have the same doubts. They're like, oh, where is he going? You've never heard of this before, so you might not know where it's going. So in short, okay, so interest is not a necessary part of what we might call capitalism. Okay, so what happens in interest, in short, is the community, the nation, ends up borrowing more and more money, and to feed the interest payments, or to keep up with the interest payments, you see national debt is always increasing. So in the US it's 32 trillion. In this country, in England, I feel like I'm still in England, it's 2.5 trillion or something. It's ridiculous amounts of money. Okay, that's because of interest payments. And so once you run out, you need to steal money from other countries, which leads to war. That's one reason for war. And another reason for war is that another reason why war is linked to interest-based lending, is because war is so expensive that it's not possible without interest-based borrowing. We simply don't have the money. It just makes war be impossible. So in short, capitalism is not bad by itself. It does need to have constraints because there are bad people, but interest-based economies necessitate war. They will necessarily lead to war. This is why the Abrahamic religions are against interest, because it leads to war. And then a couple of comments. Dust said Abrahamic religions founded in Germany, and they founded war. That's not true. Abrahamic religions.
No, they founded capitalism in Germany.
But you said war. You mentioned Germany as well. But anyway,
they founded war. You have to get my sentence correct, otherwise I have to correct you.
Okay, sure. I said Germany and war. You founded both. The Abrahamic religions founded in
Abrahamic
both of those.
Religions across the sphere of history.
Oh, what was the link to Germany you mentioned? You said Germany.
Capitalism was invented. The reason why, so the Muslim community likes Western ideas, and that Western idea is capitalism. So where the Muslims do love the West and their ideas, you've brought that. And in Germany, Protestants were the first to develop the concept of capitalism, which was to help fund their crusades and war. And
what era was that? Just so we have a bit of historical context.
1700s.
The 1700s. What, capitalism wasn't around before then? I mean, I know.
The reason that it was redefined was to try and take away the mass profits out of the church, to stop them looking like they're just making mass profits. And the Protestants were all looking about looking meager rather than massive big money, because Abrahamic religion is fundamentally a business.
Sure. Okay, let me carry on. So I don't think anybody takes that
you get
claim
time, don't worry.
That's fine. But I don't think anybody takes that claim seriously that capitalism was invented in the 1700s. People have been using money for ages, since the Roman times, well before that even.
Anyway.
Yeah, there's so many, capitalism exists since, time immemorial. Is this weird idea that it's just a new thing.
Well, just Google it.
Yeah, and then you also said profits
Google
as in being prophetic, and profit as in making money. There's a connection between the two, and it's not accidental. It's some sort of religious connection. I don't think anybody takes that seriously. War is mainly religious, hence you link you mentioned the Crusades as if it was particularly a religious idea. I think it's a very anti-religious idea, considering the Crusades are the Christians who led the Crusades. Their religious leader Jesus said, if somebody hits you on one cheek, off with the other. So it's very anti-war. So I don't know where that came from. War robs from community institutions such as education and health. I totally agree with that. And as I say, it wouldn't be possible to even have wars unless it was for interest-based economies, where you can somehow have some resemblance of these systems still existing, education and healthcare and all that kind of stuff, even if it's in a terrible state, with this system where you can borrow from your future, which is interest-based borrowing. And then capitalism is Abrahamic. There's no evidence for that. Capitalism on both sides is like fighting fire with fire. I would agree. This is going now to Josh's comments. It's like fighting fire with fire. If it's only because it's infected by this interest-based economy. There's no reason why. We're all involved in capitalism. We don't just start fighting each other. Dust is capitalist in the sense that he's got a business. He's involved in the economic system. He doesn't start fighting everybody, nor do I. So Russians are. The next comment was on the Josh's Dust sort of comment was, Russians are capitalists run by criminals. Is my summary of that. And yes, as I say,
that goes for a lot of countries, really.
Yeah,
if you don't mind me saying. I mean, I don't think we should single out Russia for, most. In fact, the world economy is basically run by capitalist criminals, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree.
Richard Branson, the Rothschilds. Or Robert Maxwell, as was.
Bill Gates.
Yeah, I don't think he was quite as bad, but yeah. Elon Musk.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. I like what you're saying. These examples are really great. You can have good capitalists and bad capitalists. Elon Musk. A lot of people say we're good capitalists. And there are lots of bad capitalists, like maybe these oligarchs from Russia you're talking about, but not just Russia, as you say. There are bad capitalists everywhere. It really depends on your morality. And if you have bad people on both sides, and aided and enabled, I should say, by borrowing trillions to fund wars. So I think the before the First World War, was it who are these? Can somebody help me? There's the famous term, the four horse riders. No, the horsemen. The people from the famous family. What's that really rich family? The Rothschilds. Like four brothers from the Rothschilds went to different places and they offered loans to fund wars. I can't remember when that was. Basically, it's always been a case of people can't. You haven't heard of the Four Horsemen? No? Okay, anyway.
Heard of the Headless Horseman?
I don't know about that. Yeah. But anyway, so things like that. So it's always been war, big war. Little battles were possible in the old times, but it was really hard. People really had to sacrifice to have a war and do without. But now wars are just happening all the time, and they're incredibly expensive, beyond our imagination how expensive they are. And it's, as I say, I've probably said this too many times, only possible through lending on interest. And then
sorry, can I just say that there is something called, most wartime economies run a deficit because they actually can't sustainably afford them in the long term.
Yes.
I mean, and with Britain, it took us over 60 years, from 1945 to 2006. It took us over 60 years to finally pay off our wartime debts. That is how.
But we're still in deficit. We're in 2.5 trillion.
Oh, no, we are. But the point is that does not stem directly from. That's not a direct result of the war now. But up until 2006, we were still in
maybe
debt
the current
who lent us money to fund it.
And it's very important to acknowledge. Sorry, it's very important to acknowledge here. We're in debt to the capitalist.
Oh, we are. Yeah.
We're in debt to the capitalist. Creates debt that puts the taxpayer in permanent dominant poverty under the excuse of killing communists. Or Muslims or Jewish people or Christians.
Or stealing from other people's resources.
This is the leadership.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if you're disagreeing, Josh, because when you say deficit, what you're saying is an interest-based system, because deficit means negative money. Negative money doesn't exist in reality. It only exists in a system where you can actually borrow money that you don't have. Does that?
So no, I know, but that was exactly my point.
War is only created within a system where there's an interest-based borrowing, because that's the only way you can have negative or deficit.
No, that was exactly my point. My point was.
Oh, okay. I was just making sure if you're agreeing or disagreeing.
These deficits exist when you run a wartime deficit. It's not just because you don't have the money; it's because you have to pay interest to those you borrowed money off in order to fight that war. That was the whole point of that was the whole crux of my argument.
Yes.
If we weren't charged interest, I mean, we'd still owe a lot of money, but we wouldn't have spent 60 years paying it off, probably.
Ooh, I mean, the connection going down. Hopefully, it's not my side.
We're good here.
Yeah.
Sorry, the connection was dying at least. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, I think we've. Yeah. Hopefully, it's not my side. Anyway, I think I've made the points that I wanted to make, and there's some interesting comments, maybe worth responding, unless anybody wants to make more points. I've made my points. I think it's fairly simple for me. What is the cause of war, and many other problems, by the way, the destruction of the environment. But go on, what were you going to say?
The destruction of the environment. Thank you. Yeah, just when we got onto the destruction of the environment and the total annihilation of the whole planet because of these nuclear weapons. Khalid, do you think war is good, and do you condemn any country that invests in weapons?
I think war is bad, and I condemn. Yes, I condemn the overuse of investment in weapons. Yes. I think sometimes you need some sort of level of defense, but nothing like what we have at the moment. It's ridiculous. Like Russia and America, each have like 1,000 nuclear warheads. Like that would destroy the world many times over. Go on, sorry.
Yeah.
So why do you think that weapons are so dominant on Islamic flags, institutions, as well as Christians? Why do you think weapons are so part of these Abrahamic display of power? What do you think that's about then?
That's a very interesting question. I think you're talking about a very, there's only one flag that has a weapon on it, which are the two swords of the Saudi Arabian flag. Is that what you're talking about? Because there's no other flag that has that.
I don't know how much we can say about this, but if you look at the royal families of this world and look at their crests, I don't want to say names because obviously where you are.
Sure.
But if you look at the Royal Crest, they're covered in weapons, covered in glorifying of the weaponry.
Royal Family Crest. Let me just check. Jordanian Royal Family Crest. I didn't know they had one, actually, because there's never, like, it's a very nationalistic country, so they do show everything about the is there at all? I'm looking for
While
images.
you're doing that, the statistics that show
I can only see a peregrine falcon, or a falcon. There's no weapons as such. Or maybe there are. Is that a bow and arrow? No, that's I'm not sure what that is. But the main thing that stands out, but it could be okay. So they are very nomadic people. They, like, the people who have just come out of tents and stuff, like last generation, and they live off the land. Okay, and yes, they used to do some tribal warfare as well. So, and they're very masculine as well. So there is an element of defending each other. And the peregrine falcon, for example, they use that for hunting. It's still very important part of the tradition in the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. So it's not as warlike anywhere like the nuclear weapons or something. It's kind of like traditional behavior. They don't start stabbing each other all the time. In fact, they're quite the opposite. They always welcome each other to each other's houses for food. So there is an element of the sword tradition, but I don't think it's particularly important in terms of war and things like that.
Well, everything's there for a reason, and if you're displaying weapons as part of your reason, then reason is those weapons get used. There are statistics that say the low number of humans that die per capita, but they're done by some Western fanatical lunatics.
Well, to be fair, it may be true on a worldwide basis. However, and that I suppose in a way that is a positive thing. But the fact that it still goes on en masse like it does is not that much. Means that that's not that much of a consolation. Obviously, we'd always wish it could be. We're always glad that it's not as bad as it once upon a time was. But I mean, I think that here's the thing they miss. Here's the little trick they pull. It's true that on a proportionate basis, it's probably, I can actually, well, I'm not saying it's true. On a proportionate basis, I can find that statistic credible. I can find that plausible. I can find that believable. But what is definitely not believable is that the human population is bigger than it ever has been before. We know this because it's hit 8 billion. That means that more people are actually dying in raw numbers, and that is not a good thing. So while I take some consolation, if that is indeed true, which it does sound believable, to be fair, it sounds credible, but even if we take that per capita, we're not dying as much. We still have more people dying than ever before as a result of war, if we are a population of 8 billion people. I don't know if it was quite as bad as it was in the Second World War, but I think certainly since, I would probably say, it's probably in proportionate terms lower than what it was in World War II, for instance. But I'd certainly do not buy this notion that fewer people are dying than ever before if the human population is quite large.
And
can I just take my take on that? Is that yes, because we become more civilized generally, we're fighting less. We don't have to fight wars to exist, because in the old days, just to maintain your empire, you had to keep fighting, otherwise you'd be crushed and things like that. So we're a lot more civilized. But we shouldn't be proud of the fact. That fact is nothing to be proud of, because we're also doing mass killings with weapons of mass destruction, not even necessarily nuclear weapons, but machine guns and helicopters and all sorts of terrible weapons, where there are a few people who are causing huge amount of death. And so what they are doing is, we shouldn't be belittling that just because maybe, certain people are behaving on one side and other people are misbehaving on the other side. Doesn't make it any better. There's nothing to be proud of, is what I'm saying. I think that statistic is useful in that way. Maybe it's positive to show that maybe we're becoming a more civilized society in some ways. But if we think about the old wars, there'll be a battle where maximum 100 people would die or something. Do you know what I mean? Because you know, we're not talking about old wars. I'm talking about even pre-Roman times. When people had clubs, you know, and the battle would be on one field. You know, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it wouldn't be carpet bombing. It wouldn't be like, you know, sort of, you know, it wouldn't be like, you know, a mass aerial bombardment, nor would it be, you know, like drone strikes. You know, no, this would be done very hand to hand.
But that's irrelevant. Yeah. The fact is, the majority of people in that country that go to war, most of the males get slaughtered in that war, and it's most of those people who get slaughtered in that war are the poor, not the rich. The rich profit from the war, and it's all these wars are there only to serve one person, and that one pursuit, sorry, not person, and that pursuit is destruction of humanity. That's what all wars fundamentally are there for. All these other fancy reasons that are given to you is a lie. The only real reason is to, like Iraq war, is to destroy the infrastructure, destroy the way of life, like the war against Russia, destroy a way of life, like all wars have ever done. And it's the rich that have walked away, always winners. Nobody wins in war apart from the rich. They're the only people that win. And those rich are the leaders of your religion. That's who are the rich.
To be fair, Prince Harry did fight in Afghanistan. I'm not trying to say there are exceptions.
Yeah, he did. You got a rich kid murdering other poor people and getting discovering that he has happiness once again in the same moment. But I don't know.
He was honest about it. Though,
I don't know. It's quite funny that a moment ago, Khalid, you said the old days. I thought that was really telling.
What did I say?
You said the old days. And what are all those days? The old days? They are the dominance of religions across our world. That's exactly what you referred to, and you criticised those.
I said in the old days there were less deaths because the wars were on one particular little hill, you know.
But it's in the old days. It's interesting how you, with one hand, encourage medieval practices, and then the other hand also criticise those same institutions. Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah. But there's an interesting comment. Oh, go on.
I haven't finished yet. It's Abrahamic. It's nothing to do with Rothschilds. It's to do with Abrahamic. Naming just one group of people is absolutely perverse way of trying to unwrap reality. It's the Abrahamic religions, not just one Abrahamic. All of them work together to conclude the absolute cull of the poor. They are working hand in hand. All your leaders hate you because this isn't a war against Jewish people or Muslims or Christians. It's a war against those communities becoming more and more human, which is the natural progress of humanity, is that each of your communities are wanting more rights, wanting to become more human. And war, as it always has been from the Abrahamic point of view, the destruction of human rights. And just quickly go back to the last point, the last question that was risen by that same speaker, I believe, actually. When the statistics of war are saying we're getting less now, that doesn't include the drugs war, the mass murders that happen across the world in the drugs war. It doesn't, which are capitalist made. It doesn't include the opioid epidemic, which is a war. It's a war. This is done, mass murder done on purpose, and that's a war. And it doesn't include those statistics, and it doesn't include the hunger when people are dying on massive hunger, which is a capitalist-made hunger because it's trying to make profit out of food, even though people in front of them are dying. This is war. When you're dying and being murdered, that is because there's a war being raged against you on which through the capitalist situation. It's always the same people that are profiting from you dying of hunger, poverty, lack of clean water. All these things never need to happen, and they only happen because there's a war raging against you. The capitalist war, the war machine is everything and ever present. And so those statistics are not included because those statistics come from rich kids. I've actually met that guy that at the London School of Economics that brought out. And you can Google that, and I'm actually in the auditorium.
You met Wang?
Auditorium.
That word.
Auditorium.
I'm actually there that day at the London School talking to that guy who came out of that piece of rubbish, criticising him there. So it's just some rich kids just trying to say everything's okay while global warming, mass poverty, and austerity is raging and destroying this very fabric of reality we're talking about.
To be fair, there have been improvements, but I think what they like to, I think the way they word their terminology is like this. They try and patronise us into thinking, well, it's not because it was worse then, we should put up with what's going on now, and it's just just psychological manipulation. It's a bit like like an abusive husband saying, well, I used to abuse my wife physically, but I only abuse her verbally now, so it's not that bad. Like, it's just such a stupid as I say, I do actually think there is credence to what the man said. However, it the fact that the fact that it's probably not that economical to kill as many people per capita as it would have been in the Middle Ages, because they recognise that actually business flourishes when there's a bit more stability. It doesn't mean to say you can't, as Dust was saying, silently kill them like with the opioid epidemic, or doing so impersonally through drone strikes or airstrikes, where it's a little less directly brutal, but still pretty repugnant. But I think the point is that if killing wasn't profitable, they wouldn't do it. The reason why they don't do it per capita as much as they used to is because they know that they see human beings as commodities, expendable commodities, where killing them at the same rate is maybe not quite as productive. So we'll just ease down on the hard killing and ratchet it up a notch on the soft killings like opioids
and cigarettes.
Yeah,
which is your country trying to ban, which is quite good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, Jordan it's good research. Jordan is trying hard to re-educate people to smoke less because it's part of the culture. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I like it. I mean, to summarize in a way, Josh's point, like the million women and children who died in Iraq aren't feeling better because of that statistic. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't, yeah, exactly. So
not everybody really notices that one, do they? I mean, it's a very sort of, because it was done, because they are allegedly collateral damage, although a lot of the killing was actually quite deliberate. What I mean to say is that they actually often did intentionally target civilians, I reckon, because I don't buy it that they would fire at an insurgent and not intend to hit civilians to deter them from being attacked.
And because if our premise is correct, that capitalism loves war and profits from it and encourages it, therefore they need to create an enemy. There's nothing like murdering people, and their families will become your enemy. So to fight each community, because those capitalists are doing their mass murder under the name of Christian or America or England. And it's the common people that have to deal with the consequences, never the rich, because the rich can afford their own high walls and security.
But also, I think that another point is that, like a lot of these, we often hear, during the Iraq War, there was obviously a lot of suicide bombings, needless to say. A lot of these suicide bombings were, in fact, not carried out by Iraqis against their own people. They were carried out by Saudis. And Saudi is obviously a major client state of America. It actually receives more weapons in overall value, monetary value, than Israel. And Saudi,
Saudi, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to research that.
No, it does, it does. And a lot of these suicide bombers came from Saudi. Saudi did not support the invasion of Iraq, but it most certainly did a lot to inflame the situation, or at least Saudi nationals did. I'm not saying, obviously I don't have a prejudice against Saudi people, but what I'm saying is that that Saudi did to a large extent exacerbate that war, the regime and the individual insurgents who involved themselves in that, either through funding suicide bombings, funding Al Qaeda in Iraq, or funding Islamic State. They were heavily embroiled in that war. and they kill people, innocent civilians, very much on purpose, and indirectly, well, through association, America.
Because when you kill innocent people, that means, and you do it in the name of America or Germany or England, that means it's only the common people that have to deal with the consequences, and you therefore perpetuate war constantly. Or look, they've just suicide bombed us. Now we need to go out there and kill more of them, or vice versa.
So I just want
to.
So there's a great comment which I think I have to research this 100% bit more because, but yeah, the thing I was talking about, the Rothschilds funding wars essentially on both sides, is a great comment again by Ulrich Wolfshead Khan. Basically, the Rothschilds funded both sides of the Napoleonic Wars and made a fortune, showing that war is very profitable. This is continued to the present day. We know that even the First and Second World Wars were funded by banks, and they funded both sides of wars. They funded the Nazis as well. So that's the connection back to capitalism. But how did they fund it? Where did they get the money from? And essentially, they got the money from earlier ventures, where they got also from interest-based lending. It's not like they just gave the money out of charity. They knew they were going to get a lot more money back. That's how it works. So that's, just, I suppose, repeating that earlier point I made. And then you got Wang saying more things about the statistics about the body count, the number of people being killed. And I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that, but I think we've made lots of comments about,
As much as, I believe in freedom of speech, but that I find is quite a repugnant remark when you consider the depleted uranium they used in their rounds that is causing cancer and birth defects in a lot of Iraqi children. He is using people who were directly killed, and that was pretty big. But you've also got to count those who died as a result of, the destruction of the healthcare system, the long-term injuries inflicted by gunshot wounds and explosive devices. I mean, because people often think that if you die, it means you die instantly, and that's just not true. So I don't know who that Wang thinks he is, although I can actually compare him to another word that sounds very much like his name, but I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. No, I'm not going to say it.
I think you've been clinical in your response to his
but
dehumanization of humanity.
Yeah, but I think that that I find a very repugnant and very defamatory remark when it comes to human life, and he's using body count, but body counts are only counted as a result of immediate deaths of the victims, as far as I know. They're not going to count a body if it's someone who died several years later after they suffered injury or illness from a direct result of munitions used. So, when I say 500,000 to 1 million people died in Iraq, it's true that not all of them were killed instantly or immediately or, as a short-term consequence, but there will be those who were severely injured or crippled or have suffered from disease because of the destruction of the healthcare system.
Or the clean waters.
There was actually an outbreak of cholera in Iraq in 2007.
Clean water, because the health going down means diseases spread.
And the US sanctions prevented Iraq from importing more chlorine.
Don't ignore that. Don't even engage on that.
No, that is not true. That is definitely not true.
Don't engage on that.
But it was used in Fallujah, actually.
He's just winding you up now.
Yeah, well, he's a lunatic.
Yeah, ignore.
Okay, yeah.
From our
yeah. So I just want to say I welcome. I think Wang 3.0 transracial Hector's replacement. He's a regular here, and he often does make good comments, and so he is testing the fundamentals of the argument. Like, really, are there more deaths? Is war that bad? And it's in some ways good to test those ideas and have those ideas aired at least. So I welcome welcome that idea in that sense.
Yeah, but I think that statement is categorically untrue. What I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with fundamentally challenging something, but to use a statistic or to use
opinion. It's an opinion.
Well, to use a theoretical fact that has been disproven is totally unfair.
Sure.
Depleted uranium was used in Fallujah in 2004 when it was, under siege by insurgents. It was used by American soldiers when they were trying to retake the town. It suffered a lot of infrastructural damage, but the point is, more than anything, depleted uranium was used,
and all across the war.
Yeah, but
it wasn't just one location.
But I'm just using that as a specific example to debunk his claim.
I'm pretty sure it's illegal. What they were doing.
No, yeah, well, the war was illegal,
And the war was illegal.
The war was not sanctioned by the UN. It was no more legal than Putin's alleged invasion of Ukraine. Yeah, go on. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was an illegal war, and it was done for the pursuit of profits and taking more money. And Muslim leadership is just as guilty of committing war, and this idea that interest is anything to do whatsoever is just utterly nonsensical. It is the idea that people love war. That's the reason. There are a group of people that love nothing more than walking away with all the profits and committing mass genocide and rape of the human race, because that makes more devout religious people, more religious fanatics are born when desperation, horror is all that they experience. Desperate ideas suddenly seem realistic and normal. There's plenty of people at religious speakers corner that absolutely confirm that the devoutness of a religious person is based on the misery that they experience and the poverty. The more poverty, the more horror, the more devout into the desperation of the unmeasurable suddenly becomes reasonable. And that's another factor.
Go on.
That's another important factor. That's another important factor here. The Abrahamic religions profit directly from dehumanizing of people by creating more religious fanatics, and this has just been a truth throughout all of the Abrahamic religion's existence. And that is a tragic way to form a community, and definitely doesn't lead to happiness.
Yeah, I mean, should we wind up? So I'll just wind up. I mean, should we wind up? What do you think? Yeah, because I think we've already...
Yeah, we've had nearly an hour, and I think that's very perfect.
So I mean, I've made clear what I think the causes of war and the enabler of war is, which is interest. I don't think it's anything to do with religion. If anything, Abrahamic religions are solving the root cause of it. We can see the more godless society of the world has become, the more wars we've had. I don't think we've had as many widespread wars with so much destruction before. And the West is becoming increasingly godless, and the most deaths ever are through communism, which is the most godless society you can have. So there's no link really otherwise, I think. Anyway, those are my last words. Your thoughts, both of you, please.
Do you want to go next? A minute just to summarize.
Minute. I think to summarize, war with interest to your interest in interests. Okay. War is for the poor. I'm going to make it sound like poetry here, or a rhyme, or some kind of phlegmatic rap song. War for the poor is an unrepayable debt. It is something that they are saddled with and have to bear the brunt of, not just fight, but have to be taxed on it and are forced to deal with the consequences, while their leaders do not. And even if they are defeated, they can, the leaders have the means to, comfortably commit suicide, like we saw in Hitler's case, whereas the poor cannot, because they have an obligation to take care of their families and to not leave their people. They feel morally obligated to not leave their families without themselves, as a consequence of their surviving the war, if they survived it. That is to say, if being the operative word. But my point about it is that, whenever a war is waged, it's always the poor that really have to fight it. and the leaders seldom ever have to fight it. You know, Tony Blair is not going to be found alongside the Royal Marines with a Lee Enfield SA-80 pointing it towards the Taliban. He's not going to be found. He's never going to be found, you know, in Iraq against Al Qaeda or ISIL insurgents. You know, even alongside mercenaries, even though he's probably dealt with them a lot. He's never going to be fighting alongside them either. You know, he is a wealthy man who has profited a lot from his book sales, a little bit from the Iraq War, but you know, he has never had to fight a single battle in his life, and yet he was the prime minister. He is a wealthy man now, and yet he is the same man who has sent British.
Christian.
Yeah.
Tony Blair's Christian.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He is the same prime minister who has sent British forces into battle 5 times in his premiership. I mean, during his tenure, that is more times than any other consecutive tenure any other prime minister has had in history. So he is a classical paradigm. He is a classic paradigm of how a man who was born into some amount of wealth or influence, and not only profited and enhanced that wealth and influence, but also never had to fight instigated every single battle that has had to be fought under his tenure, and yet has never had to fight a single one of them, nor any others for that matter. And that is a classic example of how, on top of the fact that he saddled our economy with quite a lot of debt as well, that my generation is having to pay back. So yeah, a classic example of how his interest meant he had no real interest in us.
Thank you. And I'll just say that, I mean, Khalid is a representation not of Muslims as such. He's a representation of Abrahamic religions. And that's the way you should always interact with religious people. Don't acknowledge their what they claim which religion they're part of. Just acknowledge the fact they're Abrahamic. And as one of their arguments has always been, that history has only ever really started since about the 1900s onwards. And that's Khalid's always, his whole life is based on that, and disrespect to the great developments have happened since the 1900s, and completely ignoring 2,000 odd years before that moment, which has been genocide, war, and just rich kids getting richer from war. That's been his story as an Abrahamic thinker, which is just absolutely common, of course. But history did start before 1900, and poverty and reduced dramatically since beyond the 1900s, because at that point we did actually have human rights law, and most of those people were religious and having human rights law at the same time. Abrahamic religion, gods only are interested in one thing. Gods, I mean the people that create those gods out, of course, which is the leadership that create the gods, interested in one thing, which is making more money for themselves and raping humanity, because they know that if their community, their Muslim community or Jewish community or Christian community becomes more empowered, that they suddenly realize they don't need their leadership anymore. They just need to embrace their own gods the way they wish to. And this
spiritual autonomy
and the emancipation of the Jewish nation is a beautiful website to read. And that was killed off by not only the Christian leadership, but the Jewish leadership as well, because it meant a disconnection from the royal family, which owns these communities, and they will never tolerate that. What they'll do first is just murder everyone, as that has always been their solution to all this problem. This is capitalism. This is the birth of capitalism, to dissociate themselves from this basic truth of reality for the last 2,000 odd years. And they make a lot of money about it and get to call themselves heroes, create statues of themselves, and all in the blood of the poor. Welcome to capitalism. Welcome to your Abrahamic religion. Not the people, the leaders. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for participating. As I said to Dust before we started streaming, I'm always so grateful that people are here people might find it like, oh, we're very direct and possibly disagreeable to each other and maybe possibly harsh. But I value it because it enables me to explain things more. Because if I just explain things by myself, there's so many things I miss. And when Dust and Josh dissect these ideas, and they're very intelligent, and they come up with so many things I don't know, like Josh was talking about, he was questioning all the statistics that Wang 3.0 was offering.
But he didn't actually
I don't
give
know
any
anything.
statistics.
He didn't.
He just
Okay,
gave
sure.
sources.
Yeah. But
Well,
I don't
yeah,
even know about all these
disputable
things, right?
facts.
Yeah. So I don't know about these things. So it's always great to have people with different knowledge sources and ideas and whatever. And it's far more interesting than me talking by myself. It's very dull. I experienced it on Thursday. It wasn't as much fun. So so I really appreciate you guys. Keep coming, Josh. We love you as well. Obviously, Dust, you're regular, but keep coming, Josh. I really enjoy your participation.
Thank you.
All right. We'll
I'll
end
say
it.
goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you, Khaled, from both of us, for hosting such a wide range of views. And I hope your audience are intrigued and engaged to research. Don't believe us. Please do the research. That's what Wikipedia is for. And thank you for your comments and engaging with us. I am the Dust, and I have settled. Thank you. Goodbye.
I am the Khaled, and I have settled, and so is Josh settled. Are you settling, Josh?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll catch you next time. I'm going to end the stream, but you don't have to close your window, guys. And thank you very much, everybody else. What's this? Uric Wolfhead Khan says thanks to everybody, and also it's good Khaled never made Dusty. What? Okay. I don't want to start off another argument.
Mark. Don't worry about it.
I'm not going to start off another argument. Okay, wait.
Failed with his other